Hey everybody, this is Ishi's Playground, aka also known as RBC Bard on Twitter. Once again, I am in my feelings about Christina, or Rubystina, and I'm just going to talk more about them because I am obsessed, and this is a healthier outlet than like stalking people. This particular recording is not going to be about me trying to justify this ship, or convince you that it's valid. Listen, if you see it, you see it, and if not, that's your limitation. That's a you problem. And if what I say here connects with you, great. I'd love to hear from you. I've been recording these things and not many people have been commenting, so it's kind of hard to see if people are listening. So, yeah, if you are listening and you're hearing me and you're feeling me, like, let me know. But if what I'm saying is not your thing, if what I'm saying is not working for you, just move along. There's no need to like cause a thing online, especially when I'm not trying to go out of my way to hurt anybody. Anyway, before we get started on this ship, there's something I kind of want to get out of the way before we start. It's like my personal philosophy about shipping. I don't care what you ship. Alright? I'm not going to judge you based on, like, who you pair up, your OTPs, your OT3s, your OT4s, your OT harems. I don't care. What matters to me is how you ship it. Because, listen, I'm not in the business of judging other people's fantasies. And shipping is just a fantasy. And frankly, it's not my job to make you aware of how problematic or toxic, some elements in your ship are. Chances are if you ship it, you probably are much more well aware of that, and so me pointing it out would be redundant. And also, I'm not going to sit here and expect you to prove to my satisfaction that you are capable of moral reasoning and of separating reality from fantasy. Unless, of course, you demonstrate that you can't do that, in which case you have bigger problems than a ship. To me, it's how you interact with the real world that's my concern. And in a fandom or shipping context specifically, like making sure that, like, as a fandom, we're not perpetuating harmful fandom habits, especially in the context of shipping, such as like demonizing a female character to prop up a slash ship, or demonizing a character of color to prop up an all-white ship, erasing a marginalized character's marginalized identity, prioritizing the white partner in the ship at the expense of a partner of color, or the really, really bad shit, like, sending bigoted comments to actors on social media. There's no excuse that, certain elements of Star Wars fandom drove Daisy Ridley off Instagram because of all the racist comments she received, all this racist, sexist abuse she received in response to posting a pic with her and John Boyega. That kind of stuff is what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about, like, Kelly Marie Tran being driven off social media because of racist, sexist vitriol she got. Or John Boyega getting harassed on Twitter for making a joke about a ship. That's the stuff I'm concerned about. Those things make fandom a lot less fun, and sometimes actively harmful. So if you're not doing all that stuff, I don't care what you ship or why. I mean, if you know how to act, we're good. And all I ask is the same courtesy in return, really. I ship what I ship. I'm not going to apologize for it or try to justify it to you. Don't bother lecturing me about red flags, toxic people, or how otherwise bad, awful, wrong my ship is. I know. I knew it before you pointed it out. I don't thank you very much. I'm good. I don't need your help. So, with that in mind, let's talk a little bit more about Ruby and Christina. Well, Rubystina, and why I personally ship it, or what, or the kinds of things that ship provokes and makes me think about. and as I consider like my reasons for shipping them, you know, I look at several things when it comes to a ship. It's like, yeah, there's a chemistry between the actors, you know, the dynamic between the characters, what this ship means for Ruby and for women like Ruby, and of course the narrative and thematic layers and possibilities. As I said before, a huge part of the appeal of Rubystina is witnessing women like Ruby getting sexed up in romance by someone we're taught should be out of her reach. You know, we have Ruby here as a dark-skinned, plus-size black woman, you know, and working class at that. And now you have Christina, who's tall, blonde, skinny, white woman, and rich. Oh, and if you get, and as you know, and as I said in another recording, you know, if you get right down to it, it's standard fairy tale fantasy shit. You know, you have Ruby, who's the hard-working Cinderella, and Christina as the rich and attractive Prince Charming. You know, who wouldn't fall for that? You know, who wouldn't swoon for that shit? You know, it's like, yeah, okay, there was differences two women, or a black woman and a white woman together. You know, who wouldn't like? What kind of hopeless romantic would I be if I didn't swoon for that shit? And then there is of course the question of, you know, why not Ruby with William? You know, like pre-reveal. And you know, honestly, I don't know. It just doesn't do it for me. I mean, I think on one of my Tumblr posts I talked about, like, there's a script for white men who fuck black women. You know, the choices are simpler. You know, we know what they want. We know it won't last, and you know, we might get knocked up. So do we pursue it anyway or not? You know, do we go forward or no? And you know, apologies to any sexual assault survivors, if you come right down to it, what we choose might not even matter. A white man can just take what he wants, and so then for us it's a question of how to deal with it. You know, and it just feels different when it's two women, especially a black one and a white one. I mean, yes, it's because of the queer element, but it's also because of the ways that gender, race, and class like play out between black and white women, and it makes every conversation between Ruby and Christina like extremely charged. And you know, and if I can be real for a second, and I'm not speaking for anybody else's experience, but I found that a lot of black women have been hurt more deeply by white women than white men. I mean, yes, even though white men are capable of doing more harm, have done more harm, there's an added sense of betrayal that's not there with white men. It's sort of like, well, white men are gonna white man, you know, white man's gonna white man, and it's like, you know, it's like getting mad at a shark trying to eat a person. It's just, of course he'll do that. But with white women, I think there's like a frustrated hope, I suppose, where it's like, you know, they say it's sisterhood this and then turn around and choose whiteness every time. But you know, it's kind of like something I read somewhere, I can't recall where the author said that black men hate the white man for having power over him, but at the same time is in awe of that power and wants it for himself. And I think there's also a kind of mutual envy dynamic between white women and black women. White women, especially upper class white women, are protected and cared for, you know, coddled even, but at the cost of true agency. You know, there's a whole gilded cage element to it. And so they see black women speaking our minds, working outside the home, educating ourselves, raising kids by ourselves, and like, you know, kind of envy us for our so-called strength. You know, envy us for our so-called freedom too. But that strong black woman shit is a prison too. You know, and so white women from the outside looking in don't see, you know, our exhaustion, our despair, you know, our loneliness, you know, because we're not protected or cared for. We usually only have ourselves to rely on. And on top of that, everybody else relies on us too. And so, and then on the black women's side of things, you know, it's like we're already tired from having to do and be everything for everybody. And we see white women being protected and cared for just because she exists, you know. And we wish we had that for ourselves, you know, to be seen as inherently worthy of protection and care. You know, to be seen as beautiful, pure, and good by default. And so Ruby and Christina is kind of a subversion of that norm. In this case, it is the plus-size, dark-skinned black woman who is cherished and cared for, and the tall, skinny, blonde white woman who is the provider, the protector, the shoulder to lean on. You know, it's, you know, and we don't get that. I keep saying it, but we really don't. And yet, beyond like the representation element or like the rarity of that kind of narrative for women like Ruby, women like me, you know, there are the themes and motifs that are attached to the ship. You know, and one of the major themes, of course, is metamorphosis or, you know, transformation. You know, we're talking like English major shit here. You know, you like the motif, the butterfly motif, the locust motif. And then the episode, you know, episode 5 in Strange Case, we witness like physical transformations. But they're also like personal transformations, like that extend to these two characters, both Ruby and Christina. Both of them are changed by the experience of being together. For instance, Ruby goes from never putting herself first. You know, she's paying for her mom's funeral, helping Letty out of a jam again, doing this and that for her family with like no reciprocation. You know, and it's hinted that while her mother was doing whatever, you know, while Eloise Baptiste was doing whatever, it was Ruby who was left to care for, you know, Letty and like her brother or something. Ruby was basically the mother figure in her family, forced to take care of everyone. You know, and like Hippolyta, you know, she shrunk herself, you know, and lowered her sights for her life. You know, didn't dream very big. You know, like despite how smart and capable she is, you know, the best she can imagine for herself is a sales job at a department store. You know, really, like all that hard work she put into it, and that's the most she can aspire to. But through her relationship with Christina, who is queen of I'm getting mine and fuck everybody else, Ruby realizes that she can be and do so much more than she imagined, and that really changes her. You know, she starts taking what she wants because she wants it. She starts drawing firm boundaries with like Letty, and you know those changes are not always pretty. You know, but it's real and it's hers. You know, and she explores this with someone who wraps her up in affection, tenderness, and understanding. You know, like, and it reminds me, like that part when, you know, William is bathing her. You know, Ruby claims she's not special enough for him to share his magic with her. And she goes, there's 1,000 other black women to choose from on Chicago South Side. You know, she wants to know why her. You know, and what does William say? He says, why not her? You know, why not you? And, you know, and despite her confidence in being a black woman, you know, despite her liking being black and being a woman, she doesn't think of herself as anything special. And it's really fucking sad when I think about it. I mean, and that small exchange alone, you know, is really life-changing for her. And now, for Christina, she's also changing because of her relationship with Ruby. I mean, when we first see her, you know, the Christina we know in the beginning, like in episode 1 and 2, you know, Christina before she meets Ruby is completely driven by ambition and resentment. You know, she's willing to do anything, use anyone to accomplish her goals of immortality and revenge. You know, and she's been isolated most of her life and starved of human connection. Yet she bonds with Ruby in a deeply human way. And yes, there's sizzling sexual chemistry, but that takes a back seat to the intimacy they share, to the ways they expose themselves to each other without, you know, they expose themselves to each other like are their most raw around each other. And through that relationship, we start to see different dimensions to her character. You know, we've seen like the Christina who's scheming and manipulative. We've seen her like playing with people's lives, you know, to serve her interests. You know, we've seen like Christina be aloof and selfish. You know, doesn't give a damn about anyone or anything else. You know, but around Ruby, all these other things come out, right? You know, there's like honesty, even brutal honesty, and there's gentleness. There's the capacity to care very deeply about someone. And there's like, you know, a childlike wonder. You know, and speaking of childlike, homegirl genuinely pissed that Lancaster interrupted her game of hide and seek. I mean, for fuck's sake, Lancaster, you could have waited. But the biggest change with her is that she starts to give a fuck about something other than herself. You know, that turning point was with that conversation she had with Ruby about Emmett Till. Seeing how it impacted Ruby, you know, really stirred something in her. It's like, you know, provoked her enough to hire men to beat her up and, you know, kill her in the same way Emmett Till was killed. You know, and she does that just because she wants to understand what Ruby was trying to convey to her. I mean, yeah, it was super dramatic and extra, and like, come on, girl, you know, you can do all that. But the Christina who had not fallen for Ruby would not have done that. You know, didn't care enough to even try that. And the Ruby who had not met Christina would not have exacted vengeance on a department store manager. Which, you know, considering the gruesome nature of it, you might say, well, good. But look at the alternative, okay? Like, she would have been convinced that she was powerless to do anything about what the manager did to her coworker Tamara. What was it? Tamara, yeah. She would have, you know, just been like, well, there's nothing you can do, just suck it up. And I don't know about you, but that's such a helpless, hopeless feeling to have to deal with that. You know, just swallow such indignity, swallow the ways that you're violated on, you know, all the time, you know, because you have no other option. You know, neither of them is the same person they were before they met. And witnessing that process is riveting for me as a viewer. And I was waiting to see where those changes would take them. Because it would have been fascinating to see, like, you know, Ruby transition from, you know, strong black woman / mammy figure to, you know, something more to a self-actualized, liberated black woman. Or seeing Christina evolve from just a completely self-interested, I guess, villain, ? Into something resembling a white ally. You know, like going from racist wizard cult to white ally. Now, and I understand like the trepidation about something like that, because it's like, why does it always have to be a good white person? But this is not a situation where the white person was already the good white person to begin with. I mean, I think the important thing is to show Christina putting in the work. And that doesn't mean she'll lose her sharp edges or nothing like that, or that she'll get a personality transplant or turn to John Brown or anything. But just that, you know, transition from racist to anti-racist. It would have been fascinating to watch. But the finale happened. And I've said before, my biggest frustrations with this show come from the failures of imagination. And you know, and I always toot the horn of the power of interracial sapphic love to change a person. You know, especially someone like Christina, who's, you know, I don't think she's as evil as people make her out to be honest. She doesn't do nearly as much harm as some of the other white characters in the show. In the Lancaster, literally hacking up black people and attaching them to himself. You know, you had Epstein doing experiments on black folks and like all kind of weird vivisection Frankenstein experiments. You had even Samuel Braithwhite flat out just shooting Letty and George. There was, you know, that cop in the Sundown Town. You know, it's like all these people, like, were doing direct, extreme harm to black people. And like, I kind of, you know, if you expect me to think that Christina's worse than all of those people, then y'all needed to do. They need to do more than what they did. You know, have her drop a few N-bombs or something. It's just like, but to me, it just seems like she's trying to get hers and live her best life. It just so happened to put her on a collision course with this particular family that's also her family. And, you know, and honestly, it's more tragic than anything. But anyway, so back to the power of interracial sapphic love to change a person. Listen, as a hopeless romantic, true love beating the odds is my jam. Okay? I can't help it. It's just, it really, it speaks to me. And with Rubystina, the odds are so stacked against them. I mean, you know, if I if I looked at a piece of paper what these characters were like, and I read it like, if I hadn't seen the show, or if I was just reading a review or recap or something, I would think they'd be mortal enemies. I mean, they should be mortal enemies. Christina's a rich white woman raised in a cult of racist wizards whose father wanted a son. And Ruby is a fat, dark-skinned, working-class black woman raised by a hustler of a mother. And hell, when they first met, Christina's running a hustle of her damn self. So, you know, that's hitting all of Ruby's little emotional landmines right there. You know, Ruby has every right to completely distrust Christina and despise everything she is. You know, but she doesn't. She has several opportunities to just turn her back on all this shit, say fuck you and leave, but she doesn't. And we as viewers have every reason to expect Christina to hold Ruby in utter disdain, you know. And that's before we consider the obstacles facing queer women in the 50s. And yet, despite this, you know, despite those overwhelming odds, and trust me, interracial sapphic relationship in the 50s, those are some overwhelming odds. They connect on a human level, you know, with their shared experience of being interrupted. And that, yeah, there's animal passion there, but that deepens into something more. And of course, it really helps that Christina is so completely smitten with Ruby. Like, oh my God, it's so important, and I cannot overstate this. You know, the message we usually get is that women like Christina are the ultimate prize. And women like Ruby aren't even worthy of being pursued, you know? Like, potential partners can come on to us any old kind of way, you know? Hey girl, come here, you know, that's supposed to be enough. And if we don't respond to that, it's, fuck you, fat ugly bitch. You know, this is so different. It's so different to see Ruby being treated like a fairy tale princess. You know, it's like it's a dream come true. You know, I never got this growing up. And then, you know, even as an adult, you know, I struggle to think of when I've seen that last. I mean, it might have been maybe Waiting to Exhale with Loretta Devine and Gregory Hines. That might have been the only time I've seen something that even comes close to this. And that is a straight ship. You know, I'm gay, and I don't see that. You know, so speaking of gay, you know, thus far with this ship, I haven't really addressed queerness in depth, but I think I'm going to start doing that now. And because I think there's some perspectives that a lot of people aren't like considering, and I'm just going to add this to it to kind of expand the conversation. Me personally, I see this relationship as something of a queer awakening for both of them, but not in the way of, oh my God, I like girls. It's a little bit more subtle than that. You know, them choosing each other in a time when it would have been very risky for them to do that. You know, the stigma of queerness could be life-ruining. And it's like, I think a lot of people who are, say, younger than me, the teen, you know, I don't want to say teens, but like young adults in the audience, the 20s and early 30s folks, you know, that don't really quite grasp that, because you're comparing it to 2020, where it's safer to be openly queer. But recall now that the sodomy laws were actually enforced back then. And homosexuality was considered a mental illness. You could be institutionalized for that. You know how much you hate conversion therapy? That's something that was done to people. You know, but queer people have always been with us. You know, and somehow managed to find each other. And so, yeah. Now, as I continue this particular train of thought, I'd like to make a request to listeners and to people the listeners are in touch with. You know, please say something when you see this. Please stop erasing how heavily queer-coded Ruby is. I just, because I think there's like a running assumption that Ruby has never encountered queerness, doesn't even imagine herself as queer in any capacity. You know, doesn't imagine herself as queer in any capacity. You know, never thought about fooling around with women or whatever. It's just, first of all, really, Homegirl has a strong resemblance to Sister Rosetta Tharpe. You know, the godmother of rock and roll. And Sister Rosetta Tharpe was bisexual. You know, and it's like the resemblance is uncanny, okay? Sister Rosetta Tharpe played electric guitar in an evening gown. Ruby Baptiste plays electric guitar in an evening gown. Sister Rosetta Tharpe had a song called I Want a Tall Skinny Papa. Yes, an actual song she wrote, she performed. Ruby Baptiste opens up the show with a song called I Want a Tall Skinny Papa. There are tons of queer black artists in R&B and rock music, you know, of the 50s. I just mentioned Sister Rosetta Tharpe. I mean, of course, we have Little Richard. I mean, check the original lyrics to Tutti Frutti. it ain't just catchy, okay? This link between black folks and, you know, queer black folks and early rock music is very much there. And even before that, in the 20s and 30s. And now remember, this is probably the time when Ruby was born. You know, it was a lot, you know, queer, it was a lot more accepting. You know, pre-Hays Code, like, it was a lot more accepting. You know, there were many queer black jazz and blues artists who were openly so. You have Bessie Smith, you know, another performer Ruby bears a resemblance to. There's Ma Rainey, you know, and there were even like entire subcultures of queer black people in places like Harlem. So let's not pretend that Ruby couldn't even imagine women kissing or fucking women until she kissed Christina. Her links to queer blackness are very strong and very pronounced. Now I can't give writers credit for this. It was probably all the costume design or whatever, but I can't give the writers all the credit because they're heteronormative as shit. But they can say whatever they want, but what they put on the screen was a woman strongly coded to be queer. So, and then there's the fact that Ruby never questions the fact that Christina was sweet on her. And she doesn't act all funny about it either. It's just a statement of fact. It's not like, oh, it's my dirty secret. This rich white woman, is, romantically interested in me. No, it's just, okay, it's just a thing. In fact, she was more pissed off at Christina for deceiving her than, and completely nonplussed about Christina showing sexual or romantic interest in her as herself. Of course, there's like what to make of, that time, that line, no, it's my first time. Now, my personal headcanon is that it's her first time using sex to manipulate someone. But leaving that aside, there's a huge gap between never kissing or fucking another woman and never even entertaining the notion of kissing or fucking another woman. And Ruby's a worldly woman. She knows the consequences of being caught with another woman, especially a white woman, will hit her harder than they hit Christina. And they both catch hell for it, but Ruby would definitely catch hell for it because she'd be seen as the person who was responsible for Christina degrading herself. It's at the end of the day they would blame her. And even if she may have been questioning a long time, she might not have acted on it until this particular relationship where she's encouraged to put her own wants and needs first. A call back to the metamorphosis theme. That's another layer of this relationship. It's like casting aside, false personas and expressing our true selves with one another. Well, expressing their true selves with one another. Teal dear, Ruby's queer as fuck, and it was obvious long before she kissed Christina. So please, stop erasing, downplaying, and undermining the potential queerness of black characters just because you think black folks are straighter than we are. And now for Christina. It's easy to imagine that because of her crazy big dick energy and how hard she fucks Ruby every chance she gets, that she got all this experience fucking women as herself, as opposed to as William. But listen, she was raised in a wizard cult in the middle of nowhere. She didn't even play hide and seek until she was grown. So she didn't even have friends growing up that she could be gay with. And damn well she never played doctor. She was isolated and neglected most of her life. She's far less likely to have been in contact with queer people and queer community than Ruby. And the Order of the Ancient Dawn bars women from joining their racist wizard cult. So, and also given the Order's insistence on controlling women's access to magical knowledge, of course they want to control women's sexuality as part of that bargain. And you best believe they're homophobic as shit. Homophobia and misogyny kind of ride together, And for Samuel Braithwhite, it's already bad enough he had a daughter instead of a son. I mean, could you imagine, you really think she could explore her sexuality and discover her queerness for herself? I mean, he's already disappointed she exists and is, you know, a girl, or at least probably mostly a girl. I don't know how if she's non-binary or not. But anyway, I'm just gonna say she and she. I'm gonna say she and her and woman, daughter, blah blah blah, because we have no. I don't want to project an idea, a certain identity onto her that I'm not sure how it functions for her, if you know what I mean. And with a non-binary identity, it's like there's so many possibilities that, you know, I don't really feel comfortable saying that. It's like I'd rather non-binary people talk about that from their perspective, because that's their lane and this is not my lane. I'm calling it she and her daughter. At the very least, she's definitely a woman most of the time. That's how I'm reading it. Anyway, so Samuel Braithwhite's daughter, a homosexual? Not on his watch. Now, I don't know, maybe she's stumbled on a sex manual or something, I don't know, but I mean, there's nothing in her environment that would make her capable of, you know, exploring that side of herself. There's nothing in her environment to nurture that. Now it might be another, and the truth be told, Christina might be like another situation like Letty, where like the people in her community assume that because she's flirty and gregarious, that she's sexually promiscuous. But turns out she was a virgin when Tick first had sex with her. You know, shoving her on that sink, shoving his dick in that dry ass pussy. Ugh. And with Christina, it's like, yeah, she likes to dress elegantly. You know, she's well dressed, highly fashionable. Wears, you know, heels so high she gets nosebleeds. But, you know, and there's a seductive manner about her when she's, you know, trying to get something from someone. But that doesn't mean she's, you know, promiscuous, or that she is sexually liberated. It may very well be that she never had sex with a woman outside the William skin suit. And that's a possibility I haven't seen many people discuss. You know, what if using the William skin suit to fuck Ruby wasn't for Ruby's comfort and benefit, but for her own? Like, you know, it's like, yeah, she seems all, you know, seems all seductive and whatnot, and sexually provocative, but that doesn't mean she's immune to her internalized homophobia. Again, this is the 50s. And you know, what if she likes women? But, you know, you can't really outgrow your conditioning. So, you know, what if she likes, you know, it might be like this. You know, she likes women, but she's not, you know, allowed to. And she has this handy potion that can turn her into a man women would find appealing. And in her William skin suit, she has the freedom to flirt with, kiss, or even fuck women. And, you know, and that opens up some deeply fucked up consent issues that I have no idea how to resolve. So I'm going to pivot from that and say that as far as Christina and Ruby are concerned, on at least one occasion, Ruby consented to sex knowing that Christina was wearing the William skin suit. Alright, you got that? And then, you know, so William skin suit aside, and like, okay, we have this baby gay who, you know, probably hasn't even had a girlfriend before. Maybe who might not have even kissed a woman as a woman. And here comes Ruby in her life, who demands the whole truth from her. Right? And that means the truth about herself. Like, whether it's her real feelings about Emmett Till, or what and who she really wants. Especially in the context of her relationship with Ruby. Like, if you recall, or like you just want to rewatch it, you know, look at those in those moments before she finally kisses Ruby as herself. You know, there's that slightest bit of hesitation. You know, like, it's like, yeah, she's checking in with Ruby to see if she wants that, but there's like a kind of a nervousness there, like as if she's afraid that Ruby will reject her if she moves forward. Okay? But yet, by that moment, she'd had sex with Ruby in the William skin suit. You know, she would have no reason to be nervous about it, unless it's something about the act of kissing her itself. You know, rather it's something about the act of kissing Ruby as herself. You know, fucking Ruby in the William skin suit may very well have been Christina's way of working up the nerve to be sexual with Ruby as herself. Okay? It may well. I'm not saying it definitely is. It's just a possibility. God, I love how many layers these characters in this shit have. Like, God, it's like food. Like, it feeds my soul. And you know, and look at the amazing character arcs we could have had show. Like, you know, we have Ruby valuing herself more, you know, putting herself first. You know, finding the success that always eluded her. And we have Christina, who puts someone else's happiness, safety, and well-being above her own, you know? So, yeah, I'm all in for Ruby Baptiste, living her best life with Christina Braithwhite, provider of bubble baths and orgasms. And that wraps up this particular recording, and, you know, I hope you, like, enjoyed what you heard. Again, like, I want to hear from you. You know, I want to hear, like, your thoughts about why you ship it, or what it means to you to ship it. And, you know, just let me know you're listening. Alright. See you. Well, talk to you later.